Hello, everybody. Welcome to IST 140. I'm, of course, Professor S, and this is today's class. So what we're doing today is I'm going to write some code, and we're going to talk about how to fill it in. Here's some helpful things like argument, parameter, return. All these things we'll return back to some of this stuff, but the idea is like kind of pay attention to how it's used and stuff like that. But the idea is like we'll walk through how to create methods and how to use them. So anyways, the code that we're going to be doing today is we're going to create this game where you're going to determine, determine a winning number, prompt the user for a guess, and determine if the user is correct. And if they're wrong, provide feedback, like the answer is too high or too big. And then what we'll do, like what we did was once we got those in there, we created a while loop that that kept went over like line 2 through 3 until it was line 3 was correct. Right, sorry, line 2 through 4. Sorry, it kept on doing line 2 through 4, the last 3 until it was correct. Okay, and so here's the code that made that happen. So here we have the first section is the determine if there's a winner. Then the next thing is we created a variable false. And so it was like the idea is like we assume that the guess is not correct, and that the correct variable will change to true when the winning number is, or when the user's number is the same as the winning number. So it will prompt the user for a number. That number will compare with the winning number, and if it is, it'll say you're right, and print the number, and then the correct will change to true. And if it's not, if it's too big, it says your guess is too big, and if it's too everything else, it's going to be too small, because that's the three options. It's too big, too small, or it is the same, right? This should be like old news. So this is kind of using everything that we've used before, but what we're going to do is, and this is all in the main method, we're going to consolidate this into making different methods and make the main method a little bit more simple. So the idea is like what we're kind of focusing on today is making, or in this unit is making methods, and we've used methods. So like the round function, that's a method, the random method, those are all methods. Even the println, that's a method, right? And so what we're going to focus on is making a method, and we've made one before as well, and that's the main method. And so we'll kind of go into how this kind of works, but the idea is like we have these public classes, like it's whatever we call it, and we have our main method, and our methods go on either after the main method or before the main method. I'm going to be doing it after the main method because that makes sense to me, and we'll kind of talk about why that is later. But the idea is like when you're coding, you want to have this happen outside of the main method. So anyways, the first method that we're going to create is one that is called guessNum. And so the basic formula for writing a method is we have public, static, our type is the return type, the name of it, and then whatever parameters that we have in there, and they're separated with a comma. And then you have the statements in there. And so the idea is like methods are these chunks of code that have these processes that we can revisit whenever we implement this method. So like for instance, right here I have guessNum, and every time we use the method guessNum, it will come up with an int because it runs these lines of code. And so notice like a couple of things, like the return type is int, because what we do is we ask the user for an int, and it's stored as num, and then it returns num. So like the idea is like this method will like produce a number. And so like before, like the method with the in.nextInt, where it gets a number from the user, it will store that number. And so like what's the point of using guessNum if we have these lines of code already? And the idea is like in this specific case, like this is the lines that came from that code, and it consolidates it into a single method. So we could, if we wanted to add another player, we could just reuse this method, and it will, instead of just having to copy these lines and reuse it. Okay, so let's kind of see this in, so notice that num is an int, and that's our return type, right? So when we use it, we'll have user num equals guess num, and then whatever the value is num that we get from the user, that will store in user num, which is an int, right? Because we declared user num as a int. So here it is when our code, and notice that we have, so determining winning type, that's going to be the same. And then also, I'm going to keep Boolean correct, and we have the while loop is going to be the same. But here's our first difference. So notice, like for a prompt user for a guess, we just have user num equals whatever guess num is. Because as soon as that method runs, remember it has this part over here where it has enter in a number that is 1 to 100, and then reads whatever the scanner reads. And so it takes these lines and consolidates it into one line. Okay? And so the next thing that we're going to do is determine if that guess is correct. So once again, here is the basic format for a method, and here is our code for our is correct. And so the point of this is it's going to take two values, a int or two ints, and it's going to compare them. And if it is true, if they're equal, it'll return true, and it will say the answer is correct, the actual value is this. And if it's not, it'll just return false. Okay, so notice it's taking those lines of code and kind of consolidating it into this method. And notice that our return type is a Boolean, and it's a Boolean variable that we're returning, correct, right? And so in our lines of code here, the way that we would use it is we have this correct, is correct, whatever, and is correct was our method that we put before, and what we're passing through is user num and winning num, right? So notice that we're putting in user num and winning num, and they are going into guess and actual. So guess is going to be user num, and actual is going to be the winning num. So notice it might be a little confusing at first. These variables aren't named the same, and that's totally okay, and actually oftentimes kind of preferred. Think about it this way. If we were using if we're doing a two-player game and we want to check if it was correct for both player 1 and player 2, we'd have player 1's guess and player 2's guess, and then compare that with the winning thing. We don't need to just copy the same code, and right here it's whatever the guess is that we're looking to compare with whatever the actual thing is. And so this allows us to reuse this method. And that's one of the benefits to creating methods, is that it gives you something to reuse. And again, we'll kind of go over these points again. The biggest point is about emphasizing making these methods. And so notice it's public static, just like our main method, except this one, instead of void, it's Boolean, because that's our return type. Our name for this one isn't main, it's is correct, because that's the name of our method. And then our parameters are int guess and int actual. And again, this is what it will look like in the main method. Int user num, oh wait, no, sorry. Correct gets the Boolean value inside our while loop of is correct, passing through the user num and the winning num. And the user num was found from that guess num. The last method that we're going to come up with is feedback. Now, just to kind of to remind us, the whole point of the feedback is to provide feedback of if the thing is incorrect, right? And so it's to provide like just that information of if it is too big or too small, and respectively prints those results. And the other thing is that I'm trying to emphasize, and I'll say explicitly, it's not to return anything. It's just printing things, right? And so to make a method that we're not returning any values is then what do we do for the return type? And so the key thing is like when we're not returning anything, then our return type is void. This should seem kind of familiar because remember our main method, that's not returning anything either because this is the first time, like this today is the first time we've used the thing return, and we've never done that before because we've been using the main method and you're not returning anything in the main method, right? So that notice that we don't need to have it match any type. So it's public static void. Void is when we're not returning anything, the name, and then the parameters. And so in this case, we're going to use a guess and an actual again. And so notice that we're comparing whatever gets passed through the guess and the actual. And if it's greater than, we'll say your guess is too big. And if it's otherwise it's not, it's too small. Now, one of the things that I did in class that I'm going to do slightly different is that I said, well, there's a third option, and that's like if it's not correct, right? And so I had that built into this method in class, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to build it into here. So notice that if correct is false by this point, so we already determined if it's true or if they're the same or not. And so we're saying if it's not, then we're going to run feedback, which will say if it's too big, it'll let us know, or if it's too small, it'll let us know. And then I close up the while loop. So this is our new main method on the right. The old one is on the left. And so notice, like side by side, we have these things, and like that kind of provides another reason why methods are so helpful, is that it kind of simplifies what's going on. Some things are, it's like it's you're gonna wonder like, well, what's guess num or is correct or feedback? And it says it provides feedback. It determines if it's correct, and it prompts the user for a guess, but that's about it. And that's kind of the beauty of it, is that this abstract concept is that it allows us to kind of simplify it. And so we know that for this correct this loop, we prompt the user for the information, we guess if it's, or we determine if it's correct, and we provide feedback when it's not. That's what's going on here. If we need to adjust any of those specific things, we go into, like if it's reading wrong information, then we go into guess num and check to debug it and see what's wrong with the how it's entering information. Or if it's determining a winner or missing the winner, then maybe we need to go into is correct. And so it kind of divides the code out into ways to help us kind of debug later. And again, all these things will kind of emphasize throughout the unit. I'm just trying to introduce you to some of these concepts. So again, the main thing that I want you to get from this is to be able to read a basic method and then also write a basic method too. Okay? And we'll go over those practice problems on Monday. So hopefully this helps. Refer back to how I made any of these methods, and I think it should. Make sure you bring your questions, and I will see you all Monday. Bye. Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please press the like button below. It lets me know I'm doing something right. If you have any questions about any of the content, please send a message to both me and the rest of the teaching team in Canvas, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Don't send it through normal email. You will not get as fast response. If you have any suggestions for how I can make these videos better, please leave in the comments below. Don't forget to roundhouse kick the subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified for the next video. Anyways, I think that's good for now. See y'all later. Bye.